I think, as we all know, dealing with data is very difficult. In fact, many people think it's the most difficult thing because, yeah, applications come and go, like what you said, but the data always stays there. So the first thing is probably if you can share with the audience here, how much has that changed these days with all the advancement of technology, different types of databases? Is data still the hard part of the architecture?
Data is still hard because bunch of data is locked inside commercial systems that are bought off the shelf. So a bunch of stuff just sits there. And then how do you get it out so it's useful to other parts of the organizations is really important. Many a times data is also stuck behind some kind of, I would say, walls, because it's available in that data lake but you cannot get to it, or it's available there but you don't have the right keys, you don't have the right way to get it out, and that kind of stuff. So right now, more than the desire, I think the paths to get to the data are difficult, and people are working on that. Like, I think that's why data mesh has become so popular, is because it gives you like this domain oriented way at getting at data, and you can deal with data in piecemeal stuff instead of like, I need to build this whole data warehouse before I get access to it. Now people are saying, okay, can we like talk about it in a smaller chunks of pieces, and time to market has reduced because of that, right? And that, I think, is making life easier. There's also this notion nowadays all cloud providers give you some type of storage mechanisms. And those are also like all the way from like file storage, block storage, all the way to analytics based storage kind of stuff. Again, there's a bunch of choice there. But as people are using cloud technologies, interoperability of that data is become a little bit easier, and having access to that data is become easier. But we are still dealing with the problem of people decide to put stuff all over the place, and then knowing what did I store, where was it stored, what's the definition of that, what's the meaning of that column or table or whatever, is still harder, right? So we need to be a little bit more disciplined and structured about how do I store stuff. I mean, the basics of computer science is naming things, right? Like, did you name your table right, column right, all kinds of stuff. Like, even if you have a JSON, did you name the JSON attributes right? So bunch of that kind of stuff still needs to be followed diligently so that someone who has not worked with you can understand what that structure is. Because again, we are so remote and split and all kinds of stuff. And someone may be looking at the JSON that you publish and they may not even know that you exist, right? So how do they get what the JSON means without spending a lot of cycles is the challenge.
Right. And specifically, you also invited, like just now when you were sharing in the beginning, right? You invited people to include the data architects in the beginning whenever people are talking or deciding
Yeah.
about the architecture so that they're involved. Maybe specifically in your experience, what would be some of the areas of concerns for a bunch of architects and data architects to discuss about whenever they want to make decisions about data related?
Yeah. So I think the first thing, probably a higher level thing that you should be thinking about is what are the forums where data people should be invited. And a bunch of clients that we go at, I tell them anywhere where there's architect involved, you should have a data architect. Having said that, the areas of concerns is generally you want to give people enough freedom to innovate, to do things and that kind of stuff. But at the same time, it shouldn't be such a blank canvas that they can do whatever they want. So a good example of this is if you're a specific cloud usage kind of a company and someone says, hey, that other cloud gives me that feature, I'm just going to go use that. So you should be having some guardrails saying, okay, you could use certain things within these parameters and we won't ask anything. But if you have to go outside of this, then you have to come and justify why. We are not saying no, but at least come and justify why. So at some places, we have come up with a flow chart for picking the right database, for example, right? So you go through this tree of information, decision-making tree, and then you arrive at something. And if you want to use that, just fine. Like, we won't ask anything. You just start using it. But if you arrive at that decision and you say, oh, that other thing over there is better than this for my use case, then you should have a conversation with someone before you pick that up. So architecture governance matters a lot in these kind of scenarios, because for solution sake purposes that may be great, but for maintenance sake, operational sake, that other thing over there is a hindrance from the operational side. So you have to have very good reasons why that is necessary. So that's one. The other is sometimes we tend to pick technologies or styles or architecture styles based on our own biases of understanding. If I am a data type of person, My bias is to make sure all data is correct. I have taken care of query load versus write load versus read load and all that kind of stuff, and then do the right kind of design. But somebody else coming from the other side may not be thinking about those things. They may be thinking about modularity, they may be thinking about coupling versus orchestration versus choreography and a bunch of other stuff, all valid concerns. But when you don't pair that with the data side of the shop, then you end up like, hey, this is all on the software side, this is all well designed, but I'm taking all of that and storing it as a blob somewhere that nobody else can read. And then you have defeated the purpose of modularity because now on the data side, you're not modular. So stuff like that matters. So that's why I say like when any kind of new stuff comes up, they should pair. And then one other place where I think this pairing really helps is when product managers or business people are coming up with new ideas and they're saying, okay, let's at least scope out and see, okay, how much this would cost. Is this even feasible and that kind of stuff. And they generally tend to talk to the architects and say, oh, is this like workable? That's where the data architect should also be because they can tell you where can I get the data from, where is the data available, do we even have this kind of data available, and stuff like that. Then would also give you a way to make the feasibility question answered in a complete sense. So the other place is also to talk about, especially on the analytics side, like our reporting side or things like that. How is data being given to you? What is the lineage of the data? How or what kind of transformations are being applied? What are the standards being followed? What kind of quality rules? Even in application development, I think like naming standards, quality standards, a bunch of those kinds of stuff is where data people can really help you. Because if the app has gone through development or any kind of software has gone through development for 10 iterations, and then you tell, oh, this quality rule, this standard had to be applied, nobody's going to listen to you because there's no time now. Because the PO or the product manager or the product owner is going to say, I don't have time. I need to take this to market. And now you're carrying the tech debt forever. Right? Instead, if there was earlier, you would have talked to them, you would have gotten those naming standards, you would have put all those things in place, so you would not have that tech debt in the first place. So stuff like that at a developer type level, those things matter a lot over a period of time. The other thing also is probably coaching and mentoring. Right? There should be a constant flow of ideas from the software side to the data side, from the data side to the software side. And those could be like, what can I use for certain things, right? There may be some techniques I can use on the data side that can scale this much easier versus you scaling the app side like crazy, right? There may be some things I can say, hey, if I package this data up and give it to you, then you can distribute it much easier than me coming up on the data side with some ideas. So those give and take, I think, as a team, you can come up with a better solution.
Thank you for sharing all these areas of concerns. And yeah, I have to say for me personally as well, dealing with data related tech debt is not fun. First, it's like we assume it's risky also. And second thing is how we deal with the existing data, right? Sometimes we have to patch them, migrate them, and do all these stuffs in order to comply with the new decisions, right? So I think it's always not fun. And I think, like you said, if we can deal with it earlier, that is always the best preferred options.